welcome to the latest segment of North Shore TV's Celebration of the Arts. We have an exciting segment for you today. We have videographer and photographer Joseph Neumayer here with us, and here he is. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. So we've known each other for a while, right? And I know that you worked with the town, and then as we got to know each other a little bit more, you started sharing more about the work that you've done. And I found it so interesting that I said, you know, you have to come on our World Art Day celebration, which would be great. World Art Day was past, but we still celebrate the arts here all the time. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me and celebrating the arts.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go on Long Island, and I don't think a lot of people know about it. So I think it's important to get that out there. And one of that is you. So can we have, I see you have pictures up here, you're a photographer, and you're a videographer. Can you give us just a little bit of history of how you got started? Not an hour, just a
Well, I started doing photography when I was about 14 years old.
Yeah.
The day after I graduated high school, I wound up starting work at Yoshika Camera, which was nearby. I grew up in Woodside. It was in Sunnyside. And from there, wound up going on to WPIX TV Channel 11 and working as the film librarian for a period of time before I got drafted at that time, at that stage of life, and wound up going into the Navy and ultimately became rated as a photographer.
Tell me about you at 14. Like, what was it about photography that you found so exciting, or how did you exactly get started doing it? Did you go to school for it? Were your parents involved in it?
I don't recall that my parents were. I'm sure I had, and it's still in the archives somewhere, a Kodak Brownie box camera, as many of us were given at that point in time.
Wait, nobody knows what that is anymore. What is it?
That was a lunchbox size square black camera that took roll film. Which was the Polaroid or the cell phone version of a camera at that point in time. And then I somehow moved on to 35 millimeter, and there was a moment when I was at Boy Scout camp, and one of the scoutmasters had been a photographer during the war, and there was a way in which, even as a 14-year-old or 15-year-old, or maybe even younger, he wound up speaking to me and explaining something to me about photography. And there was a way in which he recognized my capability to understand and my willingness to, and that was something that acknowledged my personhood, if you wish. And that might have been what directed me towards photography.
Mm-hmm. And so before this, all the steps that led you to it, just by chance getting the camera and then working at your first job and then the second job, were those by chance, or did you like purposely apply for those positions?
Those were wonderfully by chance. A longtime friend that I grew up with in the neighborhood, was about 5 years older than I was, wound up getting a job he had been in the Navy and wound up getting a job at Yoshika, and he somehow got me introduced there, and that's how I started working there. And I think it was 6 or 8 months later, he wound up going on to WPIX, and he got me the invitation and the application to go there, and that's how I wound up there. So I was sort of following his wonderful energy, and he's still in my life and such a great person.
Oh, that's amazing. Old friends are the best friends, right? So your time in the Navy, you said, was this before or after WPIX?
It was after well, I was at PIX, but I was at that draftable age, and at that time of 1967, where either I was going to be drafted or I could enlist. And this longtime friend Eddie, and his uncle that he also lived with, the family he lived with, they had been in the Navy. So they kind of recommended that if I choose one of the armed services, that's the one that I should go to. So that's how I wound up going into the Navy.
And so when you went into the Navy, did you have to list as like a skill photography, or how did that come about?
I don't recall whether you choose it or they appoint you, but I know that I chose to become rated as a photographer, and then you basically have to pass certain criteria and tests to get that rating as your designation of the type of work that you do.
And when you were there, what were you taking pictures of? Like, what was your?
Well, curiously, the very first duty station, here I am in the Navy, and I wind up in Morocco at a former naval air station. And once I got rated as the photographer, wound up being assigned to the photo lab, and this used to be a World War II naval air station, and there was this huge photo lab up there, but there was just 2 of us in there working, doing I forget exactly what. And that was the nature of the work there. From there, I wound up getting assigned to a reconnaissance squadron out of Albany, Georgia, and wound up making 2 cruises, med cruises as they were called, onboard aircraft carriers, working on the flight deck as a photographer with a crew of 5 or 6 of us, with these massive reconnaissance aircraft that initially were not intended to be flown onto aircraft carriers. And there was a huge desk-size module panoramic camera. There was a forward camera. There was, I believe, a rear camera. And we were responsible for getting it up and running on the plane before it launched off to its mission.
So you came back from the Navy, and then you went back to WPIX?
Went back to WPIX, became a film editor, a union film editor, and that was the work that I did there until I left and went out on my own doing freelance work. I believe that was probably around 1973. I was in the service from 67 through 71.
Okay. And so let's fast forward a bit. So then you went freelance, but you were a freelance photographer?
Photographer.
Right, not videographer.
Correct.
Why did you choose that? Because you were doing some film editing, so it seemed like, and then you were working in the film department, right? So it seems like one might go that way, but then you went to photography.
Well, my primary, when I explain it to people, my primary existence is as a photographer. Now the technologies have kind of cross-pollinated. That said, I never did any videography until maybe early 2000s. It was all still photography, corporate, commercial, industrial, photojournalism.
Since the 70s, you did a mix of corporate, commercial, photojournalistic, audiovisual, artistic, legal evidence, and video assignments, evolving as the technologies and market demands.
It's an artist's life. I keep learning.
But a jack of all trades in the photography, videography land. So, you know, now that I'm there, you continue to say there have been and remain challenges on many levels, but it's an artist's life. I continue to learn. What were some of the challenges that you've come across, and what are some of the still challenges that you have today?
Well, the challenges for any self-employed person is continuing to find clients, maintain good relationships, making sure you have some added value services that you bring, and that they're the person that you call. I was working with Easter Seals Society for 3 years. I also wound up working with a private school on the Upper East Side in their communications, in the corporate communications department. Again, that was all still photography, and also worked with and shared space with an audiovisual company doing a mix of work. And that was sort of one of the evolutions. Still photography then became more the audiovisual, And then, now with all the technologies and the equipments, it started drifting into videography as well. In fact, I find it unfortunate that videographers or videographers are called photographers, because there's a reason why there are two different words. And that isn't to say that we don't have similar skills, we do, but clearly respecting professional videographers, they deal with so many different elements that as a still photographer I don't deal with. Same with me doing still photography. At one point in time before COVID came along, it would be typical for me to do 150 plus assignments for the year.
Wow.
They also, curiously, in the last 5 years or so, it's developed that people who are going for independent medical exams, they're applying for disabilities. Now the insurance companies want a videographer in the room documenting the exam. So that's become a steady flow from them as well.
Such a videographer, and the pieces of videography you're still doing. But I had specifically asked, and I want to go back to it just quickly, about the challenges that you face today. Now, you started doing, obviously, with a little black box, whatever you want to call it. Was it the Hawkeye or something? Did they make that up?
No, a Kodak Brownie.
Oh, well, I don't know why I came up with the Hawkeye. But, and then, so then you were working with film, and then you started doing digital photography. So when you went back to school, did you go because of the changing technologies or because of the marketing part of it? Like, what was it that made you want to go back there? And then the second part is, now, do you find a challenge to be the AI that's out there in photography? So I'm just curious to know, like, when you went back to school, like, one of the challenges that you might have faced was because of the changing technologies. And then the second would be what you think about AI now and how that's affecting you.
I went to college in 2006 as a healing because I had in 1998, the relationship with the school dramatically ended after their 50th anniversary, and I actually produced and directed their film for that, their video for that, as well as their booklet about that. And that felt like a real divorce. It totally caught me by surprise because I thought I had found a home there. And
you created your own finale?
And that was, cinematically speaking, and that was 1998, and then we started having the economy issues, and then we had 9/11 occur. At that point in time, I was living up in Westchester, and for 3 years, I could not pick up a camera because I was so hurt by that circumstance of losing that assignment at that client at the private school. And one of the ways that I came to the point of healing was after a very dramatic episode in 2005. I wound up realizing that one of the ways to heal was for me to go to school, and that's how it was that I wound up going to college for the first time. Going to college. As far as goes AI, and I track these things and receive a lot of information from a variety of sources. I have a mix of folders with different aspects of AI. It is unnerving, but as the language I've used many times is it's a double-edged sword, like everything else. I mean, a pencil is a pencil. It's a question of what you're going to do with it. Are you going to write a poem, or are you going to stab somebody in the eye? It evolves so quickly that it's hard to keep up with all of the requirements, the software, the opportunities, the ways of earning an income, if you wish. You do the best you can. I oftentimes say, I need a 36-hour day because
Yeah.
the 24-hour day isn't long enough for the things I need to get done.
Yeah, but you have a good attitude, because some people, if you can't fight it, because it's there and it's present, so you have to learn about it and learn how to use it, and then incorporate it in some way to what you're doing, because it's not going away. So you can't just be angry at it. But I want to get into showing some of your pictures.
Thank you very much.
That's why you're here, right? So I just want to ask you, because you said your mantra is eliminate the obvious and illuminate the elusive. What do you mean by that?
Someone asked Robert Frost once to explain one of his poems, and he said, would you have me use less than the best words I put in it to explain it? I think that's very self-explanatory. Eliminate the obvious, illuminate the elusive. And so much of my artistic work comes from discovery, acts of recognition. There are some topics or subjects that have attracted me. Wiping light photograms is something that I developed. The purpose of shadows is another area of work. But as I go throughout the day, there are things that I come across, and the intention is to go beyond what seems obvious. And it was also said by Jeffrey Koons that the viewer completes the work of art. So what the best I can do is present a perspective on something in a way that perhaps it doesn't get noticed, and particularly if it's something that's right there and obvious.
Your photojournalism work really said something to me. So I want to show some pieces for you, and then maybe you could give us a little bit of background about it.
Sure, thank you.
So let's start with this photo.
This photo is from my second trip to Israel at a facility called Keren Or that was for multiple handicapped children. And I had met the woman who was the fundraiser, when back in 1980 I was asked to go to Israel when they were returning the Sinai Peninsula. That curiously came about from someone that I knew at one of the audiovisual studio that I was sharing space with, and he was the producer, and they wanted a photographer, and he came over to me and asked me would I like to do that, and I said yes. As I recall, it was 33 days in Israel, my first time there, and we covered something like 3,000 kilometers and never left the country. And that was a follow-up visit to Israel with this, as I said, woman that I had met there, who was the fundraiser for Keren Or. And we did a full brochure of it. This was one of those curious moments, coming up the stairs to the roof where they would have some physical therapy with the different children. And that young boy was just leaning up against the window. That's nothing posed. That was simply what was right there, arm's length from me as I came up the stairs. Henri Cartier-Bresson said something very interesting of finding the place, the space that you see or feel a picture, and then you just wait.
Okay.
It's not the running down the street per se, and and yes, sometimes that's the case, but because of the nature of it. But for his work, which kind of goes in this direction of going beyond the obvious, you find the setting, if you wish, and then you wait and see what happens.
In our pre-production meeting, this picture is something that you said stood out. Now, can you explain what moved you and why you feel like this is one of your...
Well, I knew the family. That actually is the woman who I had met in Israel, and that was her son's house over in Great Neck, and that's one of her, that's her youngest grandson. The whole family has just this wonderful, wonderful energy, and particularly she does when she interacts with people. And the two of them just had this harmony and this wonderful love going back and forth between them. I was always amazed when we were in Israel for a while, and we might go to some restaurant or whatever for dinner, and the way that young men were just charmed by her. She didn't even have to say anything. She just had to interact with them a little bit, and you could just see the sparkle come out of them. That was just so amazing. So that was a clear demonstration of, on the family level, how much of that was there. And the composition of this is just so, between the car and then the trees in the background and the park over in Great Neck that was on the other side from the house. And then you come down to these, you visually walk through to the tiny little two faces, but that's the whole picture.
Right, right. When you are taking these images, do you feel that you find yourself almost feeling invisible, and you're in a space where you're just seeing through your camera and you're not actually there, you know, like a voyeur almost? I don't know if that's the right word, but.
No, it's an eyewitness without prejudice. And I think that's essential to getting to the essence of something. You come to it without judgment. You're totally open to the present moment as it is. Well, I was involved with ICP, which is where that picture of Jacqueline Kennedy occurred, and I was doing some photography there as well as volunteering. That Cornell Kappa, the brother of the famous photographer Robert Kappa, was the director. This was in the 70s after the Navy. I started, after the military, I started doing courses at ICP. It had recently opened. And I showed him some of the Polaroid photography that I had done. Now there's an element right there with Polaroids that was part of the new technology. And not only as the artist present and the photographer did you see something, but boop, you press the button and you got the finished picture right away. Right. That was, if you wish, the AI of that particular period. I showed him a mix of the work that I had done, which I still support, and his reaction was, I don't get it.
Journey for anyone, but I think artists specifically, right, is hearing constructive criticism, whether it's really constructive or not, taking it in, you know, evaluating it, and then using pieces of it that you think might work or might not work, but being true to yourself.
I love the perspective from Willie Nelson. His first 17 albums failed.
Yeah.
And he still seems to be here.
Yeah, doing okay. Doing all right. He did okay for himself, good old Willie. Yeah.
Yeah, but that, I mean, that was a counter perspective. Yeah. His first 17 albums failed.
There are many, many, many stories, and I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but of failure after failure, and you don't know about that. You just know, you know, when they've reached some certain level, you know, of success. But, you know, you have to have a thick skin, and you have to know what you want, and if you love it, that's what's important, right?
You're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, it's for you. It's for the love of what you do. And if it fulfills you and completes you, then that's what's important.
Well, especially if you discover that this is who you are, and also it's your way to demonstrate the creature, the creation that you are, and also contribute, that you recognize your value, even if you're just a single leaf on the tree, what you contribute to the whole tree and how essential you are to the whole tree.
There's, McCain, there's Jackie Kennedy, and then there was a third one. Oh, what is this one? Oh, Life magazine, yeah. So if you could just, at first this is hilarious, so I had to get that one in. If you could just, in a nutshell, kind of tell us like how you got in these positions to take these amazing pictures and then how they got published.
Jackie Kennedy, I mentioned. I was volunteering as a photographer covering an opening of a show, at ICP, and was coming down the stairs from upstairs from the second floor, and that was her being spoken to by three people. That actually wound up being published in Modern Photography, which was one of the two major photographic magazines at the time. Mm-hmm. The picture of John McCain was an assignment for, I may be quoting the wrong publication, the Long Island Press at the time. I forget how I connected to them, might have introduced myself. They sent me out to cover this fundraiser that he did out on the island. And the wide-angle lens that I have from way back when I was at the private school that has one or two of my favorite images was still the very, very wide-angle lens that I was using here. And it all just came together and showed the whole aspect of what was going on. This one from Life magazine was on one of the Mediterranean cruises when I was in the Navy. And we were on, not leave from the boat, but we were parked in Athens. And it was wonderful because, and thank goodness I was very lucky during that wartime period to be in the Mediterranean rather than in the Pacific. Got to make a lot of tourist stops up and down the Mediterranean. Was in Athens twice. And in the center of town, there is a below street level park. And you start up high and then you walk down into it, and it's this massive plaza, actually. And in the center of it is that statue that caught my eye. And simply the perspective when you're standing up at the top of the street level before you go into it, but the statue is street level going across. And noticed, curiously, oh, all the way on the other side of the park, in other words, a block away, was the other sidewalk, department store, and people were walking by, and oh, just curious, and I had a long lens, so I was just playing with it a little bit, and wound up, didn't even know I had that picture until the film was developed. And I know I probably caught my eye the humor of it. Oh, get him chasing something. Yeah. Maybe it'll be a kid, or maybe it'll be somebody coming this way up the street. And had no idea that I had caught just the right timing, that the young woman going by had lifted her hand up as if she was running away, and that there were two people, two women, who happened to be looking in that direction. And that was the blessing, if you wish, a la Henry Cartier-Bresson, of finding the image and then, or the location, and the potentiality, and then playing with it and working with it.
Hilarious. And one you had mentioned is a technique for wiping light. Is that what I'm making? Am I making that up?
It was something I discovered back in the 90s when I was up in Westchester, that the curiosity of, oh, how about a scanner? What if I use this big scanner that I have that can do a legal size piece of paper? Oh, gee, I wonder what happens if you put something on that and scan it. That was a takeoff. When I realized what it was turning into, that was a takeoff on a process a technique that occurred back in the 20s by the surrealists called photograms, where in a dark room they would take objects, a mix of objects, some of them translucent, put it on a piece of film or photographic paper and expose it to the light from the enlarger. So they would make that image of three-dimensional items on a piece of film or whatever. Those were called photograms. Mm-hmm. There's a whole body of work by a bunch of people, Man Ray and a number of other well-known artists of that particular technique. So this just evolved, the moderate wordsmith that I am, into wiping light photograms, because the scanner wipes light across the three-dimensional object that I've got sitting on the scanner. The pattern of rubber bands, how they curl around each other. I said, oh, let's do something a little more surreal.
It took me a long time to figure out what I was looking at, to be honest with you, with that image.
That's part of the...
That's why I picked it to look at, because it's very cool.
The
surreal self.
Surreal eye, yes.
So is that in a bag? What am I looking at?
That is the video bag that I had on the roof of one of the press boxes. And I always bring read material with me. And that was the New York Times Sunday issue of something. And I happened to have rolled it up and put it back into the top of the bag. And the sun was doing what it was doing, and I went, oh, look at that.
It just, like you would never really you would never look at it that way unless you had a picture of it. Like it was just something you pass by and glance over.
Well, one of the things about photography, and thank you for offering the perspective, it's grounded in physical reality. In that 125th of a second, that physical thing is there. It is not there in the next, it may not be there in the next 125th of a second, and it wasn't necessarily there before. But since we live in a physical experience, that I believe is one of the things, and we all know consciously or unconsciously, how quickly it evolves and moves along, that I think is what makes photography, has always made photography from its very, very first days to now so powerful, because it can eliminate the obvious and illuminate the elusive in a way that we know is permanent and we know is physical.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to the audience, where they can see photography or how they can get a hold of you and what you have coming up next? The floor is yours, or the stage is yours.
As it is for everyone.
As it is for all.
Thank you. I'm a time traveler. I move into the future 60 seconds a minute, just like everyone else does. And the present moment is never old. It's always pregnant with the future. So what do you have in your womb? I ask people. The online site is onelightstudio.net, and curiously, One Light came about when I did have a walk-in studio up in Westchester when I was up in Peekskill, and I had already started on a spiritual path, and that's how it got to be named that. And somebody came in to ask about something, and when they were leaving, they saw the name One Light. Well, how come you only have one light? And I said, without even blinking, the whole world is only lit by one light. There is a show coming up at the Unitarian Universalist Church. I believe it's in July. That's through the Long Island Center of Photography. I highly recommend people check out longislandcenterofphotography.org. There are about 35 members at this particular point. The level of work is just staggering and astounding. We have monthly meetings. I'm still exploring and want to get back to doing more of the artistic work that I do and move beyond the definitions and limitations of survival that I'm dealing with, as we all are at times in this temporal existence, but now in particular. And I'm very, very thankful for this opportunity to be here today to discuss art because of World Art Day. And as I say to people, please take care of yourself the same way you take care of everyone else. We really need that now. That's
very true. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Learned a lot about you that I didn't know, so I'm so grateful for that too.
Thank you.
And I look forward to continuing to see your work, learn more about you and the work that you do. And so if you have something new, I hope to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And thank you all for watching. Appreciate it. Hang with us. And keep the arts going on Long Island. Bye.